is back to the Dadnet second edition that was a 40-minute run with looking at all this lovely memorabilia from Meine Vater, my father. Mein Vater, mein Vater. You know this, you read? I love that one. Der König is like one of the greatest songs ever. Okay, I'm completely overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start. I kind of don't even want to get into this because it's so overwhelming, and that's why I'm making myself do it now. Okay, here we go. John Breeden is his little fake name, his little poetry nom de plume, they call it, like a pseudonym. Open any page, Howard. Portland, Oregon. Okay, box 11092. But I'm sure he was a true poet in the Elizabethan and the oldest tribal sets. Okay, Ron Howard. Preface, the best-selling book of English, now a Bible. What is this? Which is this? Okay, so Dad worked for Thomas Nelson for a while, around 1985-ish, 86, 7 maybe. Yeah, King James Bible. So he's writing about the Bible. Confusing, why? Because Mom was like, we need more money. You need to do a regular job because we have so many kids that I made you have. And I think it was good for Dad. You know, it was good to study the Bible. It's a historical manuscript. It's a very complicated book. So why did he have to write this? I don't quite know. I think it was a work product. I think it has something to do with work. Introduction, an infinitude of versions. The King James Bible was itself a revision, and it has in turn been revised repeatedly. Oh, I could be going to church, but I don't think they're going because the flipping snow and ice is just deadly. I don't want to break an ankle to go to Episcopalians. So God forgive me. I like the church a lot, but it's a cute church. King James Bible was itself a revision, and it has in turn been revised repeatedly. More often it has been said, oh, I want my old King James. Where did I put that? I had a really good one. It was so old. It was like 100 years old. I got it down in Portland at William Temple House. Okay, so the decision to revise, not replace the King James Version was an antique with like a tattered leather binding. To better appreciate the creation of this latest modification, the new King James Version, we must understand how the original King James Version came to be and some of what happened to the English Bible since. The Reformation has already instigated several translations in English. The flames of Bible burning only heated up the desire for more copies. New translations and so this lipstick, if anyone needs to know, is Rimmel Kate. It's like a Kate Moss branding moment from the British cosmetic company Rimmel, and I don't know the color, but I got it at Rag & Bone in Seaside years ago, and it mysteriously doesn't seem rancid, but it kind of has like a smell of vanilla, and I thought since I look terrible I should spiffy myself up a bit. Okay, at Hampton Court in 1604 during a winter conference, a new translation was proposed by formal resolution. The timing was propitious, and I'm getting so sick I can't even read. I'm like congested. I think I gave away all my cold medicine and put it like on a free table or something. Because it's all toxic and it's gross and it looks unappetizing. Steve Eng, The Virtues of Versatility by SF. What? Oh, this is Lompoc, California. Somebody writing? Ah, this is great. This is somebody writing about my dad. Steve, completed IV to run. Please keep your responses. Steve Eng, The Virtues of Versatility by SF Willems. Steve Eng is a versatile creative type who is into just about everything. He has hundreds of poems of horror, fantasy, science fiction have been widely published, as have numerous articles, of which the most recently completed is a comprehensive piece on science fiction poetry for Anatomy of Wonder, Bowker, 1994. He is currently compiling a bibliography of fantasy, science fiction, and horror. Okay, so that's my dad's handwriting. Wait a minute. Is this really? This could... Okay, well, anyway. I don't know why he's correcting it. Maybe it's a collaborative. He has recently published Gary William Crawford's poetry chapbook, Poems of the Divided Self, is a regular book reviewer for the Nashville Banner and Book Page, 600,000 national distribution, is a musician and songwriter. His book, A Satisfied Mind, The Country Music Life of Porter Wagoner, is in its fourth printing and was nominated for the fourth annual Robert J. Gleason Music Book Awards. He's working on a narrative history, The Tennessee Wild West, and has so far consumed many years of effort. Steve, it seems you've tried to hand just about everything. Discuss your philosophy about the virtues of versatility. So it's like a survey with questions. You're currently working on a book, and they're not filled in yet. I'm fascinated with the song you've written, Dale Evans is writing tonight. Okay. How many of your own songs have been recorded? So articles are published widely for HFSF, which is horror, fantasy, science fiction. You're a book reviewer for the Tennessean and the book page. Discuss how long you've been. And that's where I got my first book on feminism, is Dad would get these massive piles of free books and bring them home, and then he could even just choose which book he wanted to review. He didn't have to review them all. And I got an anthology of feminism he had picked up. So I always love telling people I read feminism off my dad's bookshelf. Because he was that kind of cool dude, wasn't he? Okay. Your book, Satisfied Mind, The Country Music Life, I would have been about 15, 16, something like that. No, 14, something like that. Okay. Was MS accepted immediately, or did it make the rounds? How much? Okay. So I don't know why it's not filled out, or many verses. I see. Okay, he did it. He typed his answers in a row, numerating them. So this is Steve Eng's statement. In my early years, I was not multi-talented, just multi-failured. That sounds like him. I mailed poems out every week for 2 years before my first one was accepted in 1968. My first professional prose in a book was published in 1981 in Marshall Tim's Horror Literature. So I've never been impressed by the concept of talent, not as compared with perseverance and flexibility. Who knows what you can't do? I edited a book for Jim and Tammy Baker, Showers of Blessings, of testimonials from people who had received material benefits after sending Jim and Tammy some money. I received no title page credit, thank the Lord, and working on Jerry Falwell's Liberty Bible, I found a 740-word sentence which I shortened somewhat. You learn when you try different tasks. Writing is the only profession where nothing is ever wasted. Your unsaleable novel contains some good short stories. Your epic poem can be salvaged for some short lyrics or maybe just a haiku. The Poetry of Fantasy from Greenwood Press will go to libraries, so anyone with horror, fantasy, or a science fiction poetry book or reviews or articles should send them to me at Box 672, Nashville, Tennessee 37206. Publication date not set. The Speculative Muse will appear in Anatomy of Wonder, edition by Neil Barron, published 1993 by R.R. Balker. It will go to most libraries. I began playing songs in Oregon in 1972, so he would have been 32. For a year and a half, I played in the back of a restaurant. Wow! And I worked bad beer joints, too. I played a Martin D28 acoustic guitar. I played A Satisfied Mind the other day on television in Louisville on a whim. Oh, did he really? I didn't know that. I've had very few recorded, but 2 Western songs are in the can also. But Storybooks and Treasure Maps is a fantasy song in Walt's time. It co-won a Riesling in 1979. My verses have appeared in The Arkham Collector, Starline, Haunts, Whispers, The Twilight Zone, Night Songs, among many dozens of publications. Around 94 horror poems were listed in Greenwood's monthly Terrors bibliography back in 1985. I've reviewed books for the Tennessean for 10 years, but now I'm with the Nashville Banner about once or twice a month. Through a book page contact, I ended up in Porter's office on a fluke. I blundered into it. I interviewed about 160 people. Dolly feared at first I was a tabloid dirt disher, so it took a while to allay her qualms. Though she made no demands, I let her review the manuscript later. I let the attorneys who represented her and Porter in their lawsuit review it also. Porter is humorous, quite philosophical, a rare raconteur, and a Ross Perot business type behind the scenes. I printed minutes of meetings where he was fighting with RCA. They failed to see the advantages to marketing Dolly in a big way. He's also famous for scary songs like The Cold Hard Facts of Life and The Rubber Room, the insanity classic which he wrote. One night, he brought James Brown to the Grand Ole Opry. I was already working on a Western book, so shifted gears with the publisher for the Wagner book. The book took around 3 years, though I did some of the research earlier. The book has been on TV with an ad, and the number is 1-800-221-7700. The list price is $19.95, and it's in its fourth printing. We were the only country book to make the top 10 in the Rolling Stone BMI Music Book Awards, and while we didn't win, it made the USA Today. I've hit the highway occasionally, flogging it in Tennessee and Missouri. Nick's on screenplay discussion. Okay, the Tennessee Wild West I'm trying to finish now. It links Tennessee with the West, good violence, and good humor. Oh, dear heavens, Father. I need a verse collection, and I need to write some novels. As Henry Miller said, a page a day is a book a year. Take nothing for granted. Treat the next assignment, no matter what it is, like it's the biggest one you'll ever have. For instance, you've given this interview more care than many writers give feature-length articles. Okay, a sheaf of lyrics. William Blake. He saw too far, too deep to linger long. Amid the zombie throng of those who are asleep, he spied the angels near, enough to hold they shimmered white and golden, saying so he could hear. The death of August Derleth. Wisconsin winds are chill, hawk and whippoorwill are mourning in the skies when their poet dies. And at the lonesome place, spirits fill the space with whispers on the breeze, billowing in the trees. Wisconsin winds will blow, summers into snow, but winds of fame will sing evening and spring. The festival for H.P. Lovecraft. Witches on the west wind, goblins on the east, everybody's destined for the ancient feast. Will-o-wisp and ghoul ride with the poltergeist, toward the rite of Yuletide, older than the Christ. Spirits soon are dancing, see the weave and wind, patterns in their prancing, older than mankind. Mankind. Echo, I hear a howling of infinity, a million billions worth of years, my ears reverberating the immensity of spatial blue-black void that spans a multiverse that dwarfs this earthen speck of man. Okay, what is this? This is like the end of a 2-page essay? This is just like, where's page 1 though? Lovecraft had incalculable influence on succeeding generations of writers of horror fiction. It chronicles with some detail of his own bizarre, somewhat wretched life. With 2 parents who separately died of mental collapse, Lovecraft knew what personal horror really was. Okay. Is it going to be redundant? Yes, I went through a kind of ambivalence. You think, maybe this person is wrong. And the deeper I got into it, frankly, the sadder it got for me, because I said, this is so sad. These people didn't want to hurt each other, or even take a penny from each other. That they were all tangled up. All they wanted to do was sing songs and write songs and publish them. It was kind of like the Beatles. They wrote so much and published so much. It created a big organization. There's never been anything like it since in country music or before. I found to my pleasant shock that Dolly actually thought she was paying Porter. It was an interview by accident. Even the lawyers didn't know that. So it was one of those heartbreaking mistakes, but they all came out of it okay. I found out I didn't think either one was in the wrong at all. They had all done the best they could. Dolly had read that book. Yes, we gave her a manuscript early on, and the pages that dealt with her, and then the printed galleys, and then I autographed a copy for her later. She called Porter, and he said on television that she thought it was real accurate. I heard that from Don Warden also. Don's from Missouri. He's her lawyer manager. No, her Nashville manager, and he used to be on the Ozark Jubilee with Porter. Did Porter feel comfortable about the book after it came out? I think so. Now he took some exception. He wondered about some conflicts where I showed different people's point of view. Porter has a big heart, and I think he put up with quite a bit. I think it would be hard having someone nosing around into your life. I believe it's going to put his reputation into a more permanent place, and I'm proud of that. How would you sum up Porter's talent? I think entertainment, and I don't mean flashing the rhinestones. I think that seeing that the show is bigger than you are, bigger than he is. He's always done that from day one. Acuff did it too. The old-timers thought the show was more important than they were, like Red Foley. That's Porter's biggest attribute that's lasted him the longest. The whole show is more important than anybody in it. That's why he is so big on the Opry. I know he's been touring Japan. What's his career at this point? He's never been busier. He's at the top of his career again. He'll work the Opry sometimes 4 shows in 2 days. He has a lot of executive leadership at the Opry and at Opryland. He's the leader of Opryland's show image. What's your own background? I've been reviewing books for the Tennessean for 10 years. I used to play music up in Oregon and Washington State myself. I used to book people, even managed a bluegrass band for a while, though I was not in it. I used to work for the Nelson Bible Company here in Nashville in the Bible editorial department. You didn't just tell about Porter, you tell a lot about Missouri, and you describe a way of life centered on music. That's why Branson is so big today. It was hard for me to believe how much family singing used to occur, how much people would sing in each other's living rooms and sing all the time in schoolhouses. Television's killed a lot of that. That's in Porter from top to bottom in his heart, the attitude that singing's more important than anything. Recordings, television, that's just a detail. It's also from the Smokies, from the mountains to an extent. Dolly had the same thing. Are you going to write anything? Well, I wouldn't turn down an opportunity, but I'm finishing a book on the West, connecting Tennessee with the West, with a friend of mine, Ted P. Yateman. We have some Missouri connections. The Jesse James Gang used to live in Tennessee and even in Nashville, and the famous Missouri Senator Thomas Hart Benton was from Tennessee, the Nashville area. He opened up the Santa Fe Trail. We wish you well with that one. Keep making, okay, let's see. Okay, so about talking, how did you get involved with writing? A complete accident. A steel guitar player named Howard White had written a manuscript with his wife called Every Highway out of Nashville. I dropped by Porter's office to meet Howard's wife, and out of the blue she said, "Why don't you write Porter's biography?" And that kind of astounded me. I didn't have to think too long about it. About Porter, he's a hard worker. I kind of jokingly said to someone he had a hillbilly heart and a big city brain. I think he thinks like a large executive, but of course he's from Howell County, Missouri, and he hasn't lost any of that Ozarks either. Several different interviews. I collected all the records. I took my time. Thank goodness I wasn't under big pressure like some books and have to do them in 3 months or 3 weeks. I interviewed over 150 people. I hunted up one of the best guitar players in Missouri, Speedy Hayworth and Cy Simon, who started Ozark Jubilee up in Springfield. I visited Porter's home place and I visited Springfield. I had a big phone bill with a lot of Missouri numbers on it in 1989. I interviewed school teachers and sisters and I wended my way through his life. I was very proud to talk to people like Cy Simon and Chet Atkins. I interviewed Ralph Emery, which to me was a real honor. His brother died about the time the farm failed. He had a bunch of disasters at about the same time, and Porter couldn't even start high school. They had to sell off everything. His brother had died of a heart ailment. Porter kind of carried on. His brother had all this musical talent. I kind of compared it to Clayton Delaney. The year that Clayton Delaney died by Tom T. Hall. You know, you want to make it big so the person who influenced you will look down from heaven maybe and realize it wasn't all in vain. But Porter initially had a real happy bluegrass sound in his early years and then a Hank Williams sound. But in the 60s, I think, was more tragic. I think more tragic songs were more acceptable. And that's when the cold hard facts of life and the green, green grass of home made him, I think, pretty well immortal. Then came Dolly Parton. That is something that has been talked about quite a bit. They're famous for their breakup. Was it difficult to write about them? And were you kind of wary? Yes, I was. I went through this kind of ambivalence. You think maybe this person, they didn't want to hurt each other. Shaw. Okay, interview with Steve Ang by Catherine Detman, Associated Press Radio. Tell me, Steve, why did you call the book A Satisfied Mind? Well, that was Porter's first big hit, and of course the song is a country standard. And if the song is big enough, it's more important than even the person. At least more people have heard it. There are people who have figured, hey, good looking, who may not know Hank Williams wrote it. I figure that song, A Satisfied Mind, is like a gospel standard. To my pleasant shock, it's the only song Bob Dylan didn't write that he put on his gospel album. Joan Baez recorded it, so did the Byrds, so it has a life of its own. How about how long did it take you to write the book? About 3 years. It's a book for the die-hard country music fan or someone who, like now, there are just thousands and thousands of people are getting acquainted with country music and developing not only musical interest, but historical interest. Who is the book for? The latter group. The country fan, you can presume, is going to purchase it if they're at all interested in Porter or Dolly or the Opry. But if you just confine it to a certain market, you're kind of writing down. I think you doing them a disservice. I wanted to write a normal biography like you write about Harry Truman or Sam Houston or Babe Ruth or George Bush. Porter happens to be in country music, but other than that, I didn't want to tailor it. That's why it took me longer. It's no once over book. So someone can just pick this up and not even be even remotely acquainted with Porter Wagner's greatness. Yeah, I don't require any prior knowledge. If anything, I might put in too many facts, but everything is clear cut in there, and you can understand everything that's in there, I hope. I wrote it for people who don't like country music. In some ways, they'll maybe say, hey, let's give this another chance. What's happening here? Because I came from Washington, D.C., and I know what the adversity is and the put downs are at times. Some people think it's all hillbilly. Ah, he's writing it for the snobs. Way to go, Dad. With another competitor book out, Music City Babylon by Scott Farragut, which there's a tremendous amount of buzz about. And this book, of course, offers a really taciturn view of how this man was put through the moves, as he says, and it's a very negative, critical view of Nashville. Ah, I see. With a competitive book out like this about the country music scene, more of a broad perspective about many artists, your book takes a much more positive view, but it's also very analytical about some of the dealings that can get really tough, like Porter and Dolly and how rough that got. How does your book come out on the market right now? Steve says, one doesn't usually like to talk about another author's book too much. Scott Farragut came to my book party, and he's been very kind to me. He's essentially a war veteran. He's been through the music wars or the Star Wars, where he's been personally battered and banged up by acting as a booking agent. I have no scars from the music industry, so I have no personal axe to grind or revelations to make, so I don't begrudge him his. He's like someone coming out of an administration of a president and saying, this is what happened to me. He's telling his story as well as he can. I think he did a good job of telling it from his point of view. What about the derisive term hillbilly? He took this word hillbilly like these people are hillbillies and are uneducated. Steve Eng says, well, I would have guided him a little differently. There are some word choices, but I don't think he meant them that way. I grew up with that to the extent. I got up in a beer joint on M Street, Washington, D.C. around 1962, and I sang I Walk the Line, and the band was, I think, the Country Gentlemen. Oh, so his first time on stage was in D.C. in 1962 when he was 22. That's amazing. I used to go to honky tonks in D.C. I remember Johnny Cash even before he had an album. I went to a Johnny Cash show at Uline Arena, Washington, D.C., and it was just laughed at by the people in my school, George Washington. It was called Hillbilly. And you know, why don't you turn that stuff off? And I didn't wish to apologize, because I had about 15 Frank Sinatra albums too. I just like music that kind of tells the truth or goes deeper to the soul. I just can't stand to apologize for the best of any kind of music. Yeah, there's a looking down the nose. Wagner himself, for instance, was in your business by 1952, hunched over a microphone, reading scripts, reading commercials, and he's been a producer of television shows. So he could fit in here better than I could. I have a notebook of over 100 of his songs, about 150, and his lyrics are philosophical. They're not Moon and June, drinking and thinking type of rhymes. If anything, they're sometimes too thoughtful. So the guy has a brain, you know. You're not anything but very smart if you go to the top of your business. If someone wants to call them hillbillies, that's okay. It's just a word. It's pejorative at times. But you can cry all the way to the bank. Hank Snow can literally say, I've been everywhere. He's been to Japan. He's known all over the whole world. And Ernest Tubb was at Carnegie Hall in 1947. Background to writing A Satisfied Mind, Steve Eng. My book is not authorized technically, but as I said somewhere, Porter gave me the rhinestone shirt off his back. Photographs and information. He was so cute, Dad. He was unsparing in his help, and he reviewed the manuscript repeatedly. There were unsparing in his help. There were things he might wish were not in there, that were objective, or at least they're from other points of view, but they give the book credibility. Without that, we wouldn't be doing as well. I'm very proud of the effort, and the result, I hope, is somewhere close to what I want. With the book going beyond, as you claim, to show what's underneath the rhinestones, what's underneath the fancy suits, the glitz, the tabloid-esque sort of version of Porter for radio listeners in a nutshell, what's all that about in the book? How deeply do you go to portray the real Porter Wagner? Steve Eng. Well, I go as deep as possible. I may go deeper than someone would have wanted. He's a try-hard doer. He's a Horatio Alger story. He's rags to riches fellow. He's a watcher. He wants to see how to do something. He would figure out how to do something before he'd try it. That's the whole personality. To case the joint and see how to do it. I've always kidded he could have made punk rock successful because he would have studied it. He studies first and he keeps his trap shut and watches and listens. If he worked here, he would notice everything before he would ever want to get out in front. He's a prepared man, and I think Be Prepared would be Porter's middle name. He's an entertainer, and I've tried to say to people, it isn't flashing your rhinestone or opening your coat. These things he does. It's seeing the whole show as being more important than you are. He learned that from Acuff and from the old package shows where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Some of the folks think I sing better than you, or my record is bigger, or my muscles are bigger, or my hat is bigger, and that's all right. But if you don't see the show is more important than you are, you won't be around in maybe 5 or 10 years. Wagner has always put the show ahead of himself. Dolly has too, frankly. Okay. You have mentioned in the preface where you talked about a recurring theme in his career. He has seemed down, almost out, or at least left behind by a music business whose only content is its fickle unpredictability. However, every time he's rebounded stronger than before, outshining some once brighter stars who had long since dimmed or even fizzled. Talk about that. Oh, my dad could talk. Well, Porter never turns loose of his basic job security. He hangs on to the Opry. He's hung on to television before however he could get it. He once said he'd rather have a TV deal than a record deal if he had to choose. And he has had to choose. Most folks, I think, if you take away their toys, they just cry. If you say you can't have your records anymore, you can't have your show, they just collapse in any of the arts. If Porter were an actor and got dropped from a play, and he'd become a stage member, a director, a producer, he'd say, what else can I do? That's a professional. That's why he's risen again. In 1982, most things had been taken from him. His TV show had been dropped. He'd lost his bus. He'd lost his record deal. He'd lost Dolly Parton. He'd lost his song publishing. He said, well, I've got the Opry. I've got fans. I've got places to go. Maybe I can get into a movie. He's inordinately flexible, and that puts him ahead of so many people. He's not a talent contest. It's not a talent contest. Well, maybe it is, but the talent, I'd say, is the agility to recoup your losses and shift gears. If he were a writer, he couldn't do the front page. He'd do the back page. What did you do in those times when Porter Wagoner was not at the... what did he do when he was not at the top of his game? How did he deal with those down times in his career? Well, it was pretty hard. He realized, frankly, he hadn't been touring. He realized, I've got a market out there. I've got to fall back on what I do best, which is go out and play in schoolhouses. He realized, I've never lost those fans. As soon as he put his foot back in the door, they wanted him. He realized he could always be booked. He's highly bookable. He probably didn't realize how bookable he still was. So he said, okay, let's get back on the road. That's what he did. What lifted him again, no one else could have predicted. TNN, the national network, was born, I think, in 1982, and that really repositioned Porter on the TV screen. It could never have been predicted, because it was born in the middle of the crossover period when country music was losing its shirt. I think it's a case of just being loyal to something. You get favored again. Okay, so who is doing this interview? Catherine Detman. Catherine with a Y. Okay, you talked earlier about how Porter has all these different images. He'll come out on the stage in a suit that will knock your socks off, and yet you say Porter is the type of person who's just in public and not performing, will show up at Kmart in a baseball hat and a jumpsuit. Yeah, he gives so much to the audience, and he doesn't want to take any of it off with him. He saves it for the stage. You can live in Nashville. You have to live in Nashville to feel that impact, that there are people who cannot turn it off. I think they go to sleep thinking, I'm a star. Don Rickles used to joke about him looking at their glossies. Porter, when he's off stage, well, he's really not like Porter Wagoner. When he's in the dressing room, he's more like a sideman. He sits on the floor and tells stories. He wants to put it aside, and that keeps him healthy. He likes to hang around people that don't care about his profession, like fishermen. You meet people in stores that know Porter. He stopped and talked to them for 20 minutes. I met someone in a photo shop that knew him in a music store, but he keeps his head below the horizon. He doesn't like to go to parties and be photographed. He saves it for its fans. You had mentioned it a little while ago, Mr. Acuff, and I wanted to ask you about the relationship between Porter and Roy. Well, let me ask it this way. Can Porter Wagoner safely be called Roy Acuff's heir apparent? As Mr. Acuff was literally part of the Opry, and he assumed a position that no one can really fill in for him, how will Porter fill those shoes? Has he been asked not to fill out Mr. Acuff's shoes, but to serve as someone who would host the Opry? Oh boy. Number one, I wouldn't ask. Okay, I'm getting tired. Well, there's pages more of this, which maybe this is why it should be, pages. We're on page 5, and this is going to page 11. Dear heavens. Okay. What do we have? And, if you really must see, this is like I can't smell anything, but it's, oh, it was yellow paper. I forget. He liked yellow paper. I thought it was cat piss, honestly. We loved cats and yellow paper. Look at this. It's rusting staple. Okay, this is a second copy of that. That's excellent. Interview with Steve Eng. Okay, wait. Oh, this is about Jimmy Buffett. Oh, okay. I'm getting hungry. Is that allowed? 10:36. Okay. Jimmy is frugal and doesn't waste money. Okay. Well, okay, this is chapter 2 of the DadNet. As you can see, it's a total overwhelming amount of paper. Perhaps if I sent it off to the Tennessee State Museum, it will take them 6 months or 9 months or something to sort through it and decide what they want. And then what? Somebody who wants to write a book would come upon it or something? I guess that's the point, and I really didn't get very far through it at all. I just got stuck. This... Yeah. I don't know. Does that work? Yeah, that works. Okay. Come and get it, y'all. Wouldn't it be nice if they just did? They will. They'll like literally let me put it in FedEx and pay for it, and then Then I have a clean cabinet. That heartwarming little dad business. So I gotta say thanks to Ransom and Helen for buying us a house. Like if I had my parents buying me a house at 46. Now how old was he when we got that? 45. He was 45 when his parents bought him a house. Like. And that was an enormous amount of privilege that went into my childhood and went into his artistic literary career. And most people are not that fortunate. So I've got to recognize how awesome that was. It was kind of a magical house, too. I have such great memories of it. And it was very hard to downsize to a lesser house. It was very depressing. But these, it was like one of these enormous Victorians they have up in Astoria where like everything is always breaking, like the plumbing and the leaky windows and everything. It was just like, it's now valued quite a lot because it's had a lot of upgrades and we could not afford the upgrades. So, but Mom was so cool, she like invited all the homeless to come live in the attic, the basement, the front room. It was like a way of living Mom had. She would pay people's bills and keeping her karma extremely pure by always helping people. Gotta love that about my mommy.